Narayanam namaskritya naram chaiva narottamam devim saraswatim vyasam tato jayamudirahyet. Namaste and Shriramajayam to everyone. Welcome to another episode of Mahabharata Adiparva on my channel Kaliyuga Dharma. Today we will take a break from our tale of Janamejaya and Tanka. As I have explained in earlier episodes, the starting points of the Mahabharata involve multiple disparate stories which add up to a main narrative. We already saw a few such stories. I need to remind you from time to time that the Mahabharata is Ugrashrava's narration of whatever Vaishampayana narrated to the court of Janamejaya, and Vaishampayana's narration was a narration of whatever Vyasa narrated to his disciples, Vaishampayana included. Technically, the Mahabharata is a series of tales, concept-based events, and moral scriptural teachings encapsulated in Vyasa's narration, which is in turn encapsulated in Vaishampayana's narration, which is in turn encapsulated in Ugrashrava's narration. And if you want to count my narration to you as another narration, then in essence you're listening to a narration within a narration within a narration within a narration. A narrationception, if such a word can even exist. As always, before we jump into today's episode, I will remind you again that you can simply listen to my narration and you don't have to read whatever comes on the screen. All that is just an elaboration and a summary, as may be the case of whatever I am narrating. If you wish to go back to these episodes in the future, you can pause and read the things on the screen at your own pace, but at an overview level, you can just listen to the narration. It's enough. So now to our episode. Ugrashrava's narration is briefly interrupted by a question by Maharishi Shaunaka, who is a rishi of the Bhargava-Gotra, which is also popularly known today as the Shrivatsa Gotra. Shaunaka asks to Ugrashrava to start the narration of the Mahabharata itself, and Ugrashrava does so by going into the Bhargava-Gotra's own history. Somehow the Puranas of the sages of this lineage are tied up to the narration of the Mahabharata, it seems. So, Ugrashrava begins to narrate. Bhrgu was a Brahmarishi, one of several Brahmarishis who was a first primordial creation of Brahma. And these Brahmarishis would create all the lineages of all the creatures we see in creation today. Brahma had created a first creature of every kind. That is, through his Brahmarishis, these Brahmarishis would create a first creature of every species, if you will, and from them descend entire lineages of creatures. This adds up to many creatures of various types sharing common ancestry with the first lineage of creatures through them, and through all these Brahmarishis, every creature is related to Brahma himself. Some of the oldest creations were a group of Brahmarishis. And why are they called Brahmarishis? They are as powerful as Brahma himself. They have his abilities. Now, among the very first creations of Brahma were, of course, Narada, Sanaka, Sananda, Sanat Kumara. These are groups of sages. And then there was Shiva. And of course, then come the Brahmarishis. There are several such Brahmarishis. Vasishtha, Atri, Pulaha, Pulastya. Pulastya is famously the ancestor of Ravana. And of course, Bhrgu, the rishi whom we are going to look at today. Among a few such Brahmarishis, Bhrgu is a prominent one. In various kalpas, these Brahmarishis emerge either out of Brahma's own head or are invoked by him in bodily forms through other sources as well. Bhrgu was invoked from a Yagnya fire of Vrndavan by Brahma himself. Now remember, Brahmarishis too will die with time, and they can be reborn as great emperors, sages, Devas, or once again as Brahmarishis from some other source. It does not always mean that they will emerge only from Brahma's head. They will oftentimes re-emerge kalpa after kalpa through various aspects of Brahma, sometimes from his voice, his words, etc. And when Bhrgu was born, he was a fully grown man with celestially supernormal intelligence, the knowledge of the Vedas, and the power of Brahma himself right at the time of his birth. He had a son, Chyavana by name, a name that is still recited by Brahmanas of the Shrivatsa Gotra during their religious introductory rite of the Abhivadana. Abhivadana is a rite that a Brahmana must perform when he meets his elders and his Acharya, before touching the feet, there is a Sanskrit recitation in which he will recall the founding fathers of his lineage, that is the names of all the Brahmarishis and the Maharishis that came after them, and then he will touch the feet of his elders. In this regard, till today, Shrivatsa Gotra Brahmanas still recite the name of Chyavana Maharishi. So Bhrgu's son was Chyavana, Chyavana's son was Pramathi. Pramathi married a certain lady called Ghritachi and had a son through her by the name of Ruru. Ruru's son was Shunaka, and Shunaka was the ancestor of the same Shaunaka who was listening to Ugrashrava narrate the Mahabharata in Naimisharanya, and who in fact asked Ugrashrava to start the narration of the Mahabharata. Ruru's wife was a lady called Pramadvara. Ugrashrava narrated all this, and hearing Ugrashrava say this, Shaunaka now asked him, "Tell me a little about all of them. Start with Chyavana." Ugrashrava started answering this request. And Bhrgu's wife was Puloma. When she was pregnant with Chyavana in her womb, one fine day, her husband Bhrgu and his servants and students left the ashrama for some work, and just then a Rakshasa entered the ashrama. He appeared in the hut of Puloma. Puloma was a highly cultured and refined woman who welcomed him and invited him to sit down and have some food and water. She offered him fruits to eat as her guest. As according to the Dharma Shastras, you must never turn away a guest unless and until you know that they are there to cause you harm. And just because someone is a Rakshasa, you cannot assume that he or she is there to just hurt you. Because even in these otherwise tamasic races, there are very good people such as Vibhishana. The Rakshasa, however, had a history with Puloma, which was unknown to Puloma herself. He had many years ago sought Puloma's hand in marriage, but Puloma's father had turned him away. He had told her. Now the Rakshasa came to the ashrama, and when Puloma asked him to sit down and have some fruits, he told all of this to her. He told her this, and then he demanded that she leave her husband and come with him despite the fact that she was pregnant with her husband's child. Rakshasas do not care for marriages. They are such creatures. They do as they please, and it's their tendency to do so. Puloma said that whatever the case, she was by Vedic law and the law of Shriman Narayana another man's wife. He would not listen, and he told her that he would invoke Agnideva himself from the fire burning in the Yagnya kunda of Bhrgu's hut and ask Agni himself whose wife she is supposed to be. The foolish Rakshasa thought that Agni, who witnesses all Vedic marriages, would back him up in his baseless claim and that she was meant to be his wife. He went by the fire and called upon Agni, and the Deva emerged from the fire, dancing in flames in a very fiery form and in a body that was entirely made of fire. Upon being asked whose wife Puloma was meant to be, Agni said, "Indeed, Puloma's hand was sought by you, but the marriage ceremony and Kanyadana were not done to you. Puloma's hand was given in the name of Shriman Narayana to Bhrgu, and thus, by his will, she was his wife. And Bhrgu recited mantras calling upon Paramatman within me, Agnideva, to sanctify and consecrate the marriage. Therefore, I, as Agnideva, witness that Puloma is the wife of Bhrgu, and that you, O Rakshasa, leave the hut at once." Unable to bear his rage at Agnideva's mere reiteration of the truth, he grabbed Puloma by the hand and lifted her and carried her off in the form of a boar. He shapeshifted himself into a wild boar, put her on his tusks, and ran off with her into the forest outside the ashrama. Do note that Rakshasas and members of their related races such as Yakshas possess the ability to shapeshift, as they are sorcerers by nature. They are celestial sorcerers. The panic-stricken Puloma's uterine muscles, or uterus, it gave way to the fetus, and the fetus fell out, and it fell on the ground. But remember, this is no ordinary fetus. It is the son of Bhrgu, and it has his blood directly in it. It has his powers. And therefore, the fetus was not only unharmed, but in a few seconds, it developed outside the womb of Puloma into a full baby. And like his father, the baby boy possessed abnormally high intelligence, for he knew exactly what was going on at that very moment. In his wrath, the baby sage, or sage baby, if you will, threw one look of fury at the Rakshasa boar carrying his mother off, and the boar was, by the power of the baby's penance, even before he could scream out loud, turned to a heap of ash, all in just a few seconds. Puloma picked up a superhuman baby and ran back to the ashrama in panic. Now when Bhrgu heard of all this and what had happened, he wanted to additionally curse that Rakshasa even more, the already dead Rakshasa. But as we saw, what happens, what anger does in terms of clouding one's judgment of even Vedic scholars, Bhrgu's attention all of a sudden fell on Agni, because when Puloma began to narrate the story, Bhrgu now listened to what Agnideva had told to the Rakshasa from his Yagnya Kunda. And he felt that more than the Rakshasa, Agni was responsible in somehow convincing the Rakshasa to carry his wife away. But that was not the case. But Bhrgu in his anger would not listen. That's what anger does. And thus Bhrgu in his wrath now believed that Agni was responsible for his wife's hardships and for his son falling out of her womb. And instead of the Rakshasa, he wanted to curse Agnideva as he saw him as the cause of the entire fiasco. His curse was this: you, Agni, and your element fire will now turn into an eater of all things. Anything and everything thrown into you shall be born to you. Thus, even if filth and garbage were thrown into your fire, they would reach you, O Agnideva. Agni in his loka was beside himself with anger. And Agni asked Bhrgu, how could you curse me for merely speaking the truth? What I said was the truth. And the sequence of events as they had happened, and I did not support his claim. I told him to leave the hut. Now Agni was cursed, and in retaliation he made his element fire to entirely disappear from creation itself. All the lokas went dark, yagnyas went off, and the devas knew that without fire, their powers would soon die out, and they would be reduced into weak beings of no power. Brahma himself could not perform the yagnya that made creation go about. And in a fright, without knowing what to do, he called upon Paramatman Shriman Narayana, Vishnu himself, to aid him and all creations, for he knew not what to do in this scenario. As we see from this example, only Paramatma Shriman Narayana knows the best solution to any problem, and we can try all we want using our limited free will to do what we want using our finite intelligence. But ultimately, even the intelligence of the oldest and grandest of the Devas, Brahma, is limited. And as we can clearly see, Brahma himself did not know what to do. But Brahma did not merely invoke Vishnu, he invoked him as the Antaraatman of Agni in order to make Agnideva see better sense. Being the ultimate controller of our own Jivatman and our body being his Sharira, Shriman Narayana exercises omnipresence and omnipotence over all souls, although he will not keep showing this power of his, as he also has allowed every soul an amount of free will according to its prarabdha karma phala. And as Agni's Antaraatman, Vishnu now heeded the request of Brahma, and he made Agni change his mind as the Antaraatman of Agni. He made him calm down, he made him reappear and restore his element to all the lokas. Brahma, now grateful to Vishnu and of course grateful to Agni for having changed his mind, blessed Agni that anything that his element fire touched will be purified. Thus, until present day, Vaidikas use water and fire as two elements of purification. We cook our food using fire because fire purifies. Chyavana penanced for centuries, in the process of which he met his future wife Sukanya, a story for another day. Sukanya was the daughter of King Shariati of Ayodhya, who was the son of Ikshvak, and one of the ancestors of Sri Rama. By Sukanya, he had a son named Pramati. So the picture on your screen is basically Maharishi Chyavana with Sukanya greeting the Ashwin Devas, and that's a story for another day. We will see that in the course of Mahabharata. It's a very famous story from his life. And Sukanya and Chyavana had a son Pramati. Pramati married Ghritachi, and Ghritachi's son, Pramati's son through Ghritachi, was Ruru. Ruru was in turn the father of Shunaka, and therefore the ancestor of the Shaunaka whom we are seeing today. An episode from Ruru's life will be analyzed here in Adiparva. There was a very I'm not going to go into the lifetime of Ruru and what exactly happened in Ruru's life. There happened to be a very kind-hearted and gentle Brahmana sage by the name of Sthulakesha. He lived on the banks of a river where one day he saw a pregnant Apsara, Menaka. She was pregnant with the child of the Gandharva king Vishwavasu. He was nowhere in the picture. And Sthulakesha asked Menaka to come to his ashrama and live there as his own daughter because he was afraid for the safety of the pregnant woman. He took care of her until the day she delivered. But when the day did come, the careless Apsara, vainglorious as she was to go back to Swarga after dropping her baby whom she looked at as just a baggage, dropped her on the banks of the river and just flew off. The baby was a beautiful girl, endowed with the divine light of penance that radiates from the bodies of the dwellers of Swarga. She had the light of the Devas coming out of her very skin. When Sthulakesha found her, he was very angry as to how her careless and apathetic mother had left her. We can see right here a quality that makes Devas very much like humans, for this baby girl's father was nowhere in the picture to be seen, although he had got Menaka pregnant, and Menaka dropped her and ran away, like so many human fathers and mothers today do to so many abandoned children. Sthulakesha took the baby girl and brought her up in his ashrama as his own daughter. The girl gained the name of Pramadvara, meaning she who was carelessly abandoned. It so happened that Pramati's son, Ruru, walked by Sthulakesha's ashrama many years later, and Pramadvara was a young woman. The two of them saw each other. They fell in love with one another. Ruru went to his father Pramati and he asked Pramati, I want to marry Pramadvara. So Pramati came to Sthulakesha, and Sthulakesha in the meantime had been told by his daughter Pramadvara that she wanted to marry Pramati's son Ruru. The two fathers arranged the wedding of Ruru and Pramadvara, and both of them got married. But what you need to note over here is that the love that Ruru had for Pramadvara was one of a very obsessive kind. Now, great attachment that a husband has for his beautiful wife is not wrong, obviously, according to Sanatana Dharma, but Sanatana Dharma always warns you that any obsession can turn into emotional instability later on. And so it happens. Pramadvara was one day bathing with her women friends in the river, and she stepped upon a snake which subsequently bit her. As the snake was extremely venomous, Pramadvara died on the spot. Sages from around heard the girl's cries and they came running over there, but they couldn't do anything. She was already dead. And so the sages wept and they cried and they lamented, so that such a young and beautiful girl with a full life ahead of her had to die so tragically. But Vyasa says that this is the dharma of time itself. It's Kala Dharma, for we do not know when our own end is at hand, and we must live every moment thinking of Shriman Narayana, for if we think of Shriman Narayana every moment, we will have no regrets when our own end comes expectedly or unexpectedly. But when Ruru heard that such a fate had befallen his wife, he went into a sorrowful frenzy. He looked at the corpse of his beloved wife and lamented, and then he ran into the forest and began to curse the Devas. Now remember, Ruru was no ordinary human. He had the qualities of He had various flaws that humans have today, such as excessive sorrow, obsession, greed. But he was the great-grandson of a Brahmarishi, making his penance much greater to that possessed by almost any human today. And so, Ruru's cursing had a potential to harm the Devas. And it was not just that. Ruru lamented in the name of Vishnu, saying that for all his bhakti towards Shriman Narayana and accepting him as Paramatma, as the one Almighty, is this the reward he deserved? The Devas, hearing these pleas and seeing what a great sage Ruru really was, they got frightened and they sent a messenger to Ruru to tell Ruru that there is a solution for him. Ruru could reduce half his lifespan and give that much strength of his own prana to his wife so that her soul may reanimate her body. And by reducing half his lifespan and giving that much of his lifespan to Pramadvara, she could come back to life and enjoy that much time with him. Ruru told the Deva messenger very clearly, yes, I will take this deal. I want my wife back. And so the messenger went to Yamaloka and bargained with Yama. And Yama said, okay, if he will reduce half his lifespan, I will restore her back to life. The Devas made it very clear to Ruru. They told Ruru, we are not Shriman Narayana, we are Jivatmans. We cannot manufacture years for your wife, and therefore, whatever life she gets must be taken from your lifespan. We can only readjust lifespans at max. We cannot create new lifespans. He took the deal, and Pramadvara came back awake as if from a deep sleep. Now, Ruru could have been contented with this and continued living his life with Pramadvara happily, but just like Uttanka, he would continue to ponder about who that Naga was that bit his dearest wife and how it gave her pain, and he drove himself into a mad frenzy to want to kill all Nagas and all wherever he found them. And one day, he was resting under a tree and he saw a small snake curled up by his feet. He picked up that snake and he was going to beat it to death. The snake woke up in panic and it shouted at him, asking him who he was. He told, I am Ruru. One of your brothers one day bit my wife a long time back, and you know how much pain it gave me and my wife? I am going to kill all Nagas because I have borne a deep hatred and vengeance for them. And the snake tells him in a soft voice, do you really think all snakes are evil? Do you think all snakes are venomous? Most of us are non-venomous. Most of us are gentle creatures. And the kinds that are venomous are a very small number. I belong to a group of non-venomous snakes known as Dundubha. We are very soft, shy and gentle creatures. I am a very good person. I am a good snake. You shouldn't kill me. Hearing such a soft and childlike plea from the snake, Ruru became scared. He came to his senses and he put down the snake. He was afraid of incurring the evil karma of harming such a gentle and a nice creature. He kept the snake down on the ground. He sat down beside it and he is asked, you seem like a very wise person and you speak so gently and so kindly. Who are you really? The Dundubha replies, I used to be in my previous life a Brahmana sage called Sahasrapaat. I incurred the curse of being born among snakes. The soul, which had been born in the body of a snake, retained the wisdom of the sage Sahasrapaat, which is what made it so kind. Ruru asked, but who would curse you? You seem like such a nice person. The snake replied, I had a friend called Khagama, a Brahmana sage like me. We both lived in a forest together and penance together. One day I played a mean trick on him. I took a bunch of grass blades, modeled it to look like a snake, and I threw it on my friend Khagama, and I started shouting, snake, snake. And Khagama became wild with rage once he found out that I had played a mean trick on him. And so in his anger, he said, may you be reborn as a snake. I immediately asked him, I just played a mean trick on you. I get it, but I'm your friend. Why would you say such a terrible thing to me? And Khagama said, after he cooled down, yes, I regret my curse. But okay, let me use my penance to try to turn the curse around. And he used his penance and he looked into my future lifetime and he said, yes, there is a sage called Ruru who will come by your path. And this Ruru will be having enough tapobala to liberate you from your snake body and restore your soul to its original body, the body of Sahasrapaat. Look out for Ruru. And therefore, when Sahasrapaat's lifetime ended, he got reborn as a Dundubha snake. And Ruru, hearing the story, was like, wait, but I am Ruru. You mean to say you're looking at me? You're looking for me all these days? As soon as the snake heard this, it fell at Ruru's feet. And then it turned lifeless. It died on the spot. And even as the snake turned lifeless, a handsome Brahmana appeared right by its side out of thin air. And that was the sage Sahasrapaat. Now, let's pause here and analyze what has happened. For all his ignorance of hating snakes, he had enough tapobala to do good by liberating the snake from a curse. As the snake's soul left its body and gained a human body, we see how fleeting our own body is. Our Jivatman takes body after body, and the body to the Jivatman is like what cloth is to our body, the clothes that we wear. We also see that touching someone's feet, the feet of a person who's very high in penance, gives us some of their punya and gives them some of our sins which they burn away using their tapobala. Therefore, We must be very careful whose feet we touch. We shouldn't touch just anyone and everyone's feet just because they're older than us in age. They should be older than us in dharma, which is why by default, we touch the feet of our parents, our acharya, and God in the temple, and of course the feet of cows and bulls. And even when we touch the feet of our parents, they should be at least reasonably dharmic people. If your parents are evil people, their feet should not be touched. The feet of a person, however old, should not be touched. Because in reality, if you think about it, when Osama bin Laden died, he was about 70 years of age. That makes him an old man. Can we touch his feet? Is he really great in dharma? No, he was a terrorist. Therefore, be very careful of whose feet you touch. Sahasrapaat now looked at Ruru and told him to leave his anger behind, and he told him a Brahmana's way is the way of ahimsa and kindness and gentleness. Using force to punish evil people is the way of a Kshatriya. Leave your anger behind. And he tells him, there is a king known as Janamejaya. He lived even in the last Kalpa. And he performed a Yagnya called a Sarpasatra Yagnya. And he killed many snakes. And again in the future, this Janamejaya is going to come. And he will perform a Sarpasatra Yagnya against all Nagas. And so he tells Ruru, my dear Ruru, your hatred that you bore towards all Nagas is nothing new. It has existed in previous Kalpas and it will exist in times to come as well. But what's your lesson, Ruru? You must remember that you should never condemn an entire race just because a few members of that race have done you some wrong. Now we will stop here and go back in our next episode to where we left the tale of Uttanka and Janamejaya and the Sarpasatra Yagnya that they were going to conduct. We will see in our next episode about the same Janamejaya whom Sahasrapaat has started talking about. And we will see whether he truly could get revenge on Takshaka for what Takshaka did to his father. So, stay tuned for the next episode. As always, there are some moral takeaways for today's episode. These takeaways include the fact that you mustn't hate a whole kindred or race of creations just because one or a few members of that race happen to be bad. Penance is a precious commodity. Use it wisely. You can use penance to do good the same way you can use penance to do evil. Ravana and Hiranyakashipu and Diti, they used penance to do evil. Whereas Narada, Vasishtha, they all used penance to do good. Use your penance to only do good. Do not ever use it to do evil. And a reminder again, do not condemn an entire kindred of creations just because of few of their members doing something evil. They all belong to Shriman Narayana. They are all Shriman Narayana. All creations are Shriman Narayana's Shariras. He is their controller. He will decide their fates. Condemn evil, try to stop it, but do not condemn an entire race because one member of that race happens to be evil. We end our episode here with our usual shout out to Dakshin Vrndavan. To be noted here is the fact that this organization is not a dairy farm. They don't sell dairy products. They are not a for-profit organization, and they are a purely religious, dharmic organization whose sole purpose is to give cows and bulls, the akaras of Shriman Narayana, a good life and ensure that dharma continues in Kali Yuga. If you can afford 45,000 INR a year to adopt a cow or a bull with them, Gauseva transforms your mind into a dharmic space and enables you to master dharmic scriptures such as Mahabharata. It has worked for me. It is working for me even today. And I'm sure it will work for you as well. Srimate Narayanaya Namo Namaha.